Good evening, everyone. This is your girl, Nodella Sakajuwia Jordan, coming forth with another live intimate talk show. Thank you so very much for tuning in with us on tonight. Don't forget, this is our chat and chew night. I really love our chat and chew night broadcasts, talk shows, when we get to talk with you and we, kind of snack. And I got my fruit right here, no junk food. I got my fruit and so I'm ready to do some chatting and some chewing. We just also want to remind everyone that during our chat and chew segment, you are invited to join us live. So if you would like to join us live by coming on Zoom, send me or post in the comment section that you want to come on live, and I can DM you the call-in number. And the reason why I'm doing it like this now, because the last time we had some crazy person that called in, and so just to try to avoid that, if you want to become part of the live broadcast tonight, just let us know in the chat section and we will be more than happy to have you to be part of the live discussion. So tonight we are going to be talking about how intimacy governs our relationships. And for those of you who don't know, I also wrote a book regarding intimacy. It's called The Intimate Place, My God, My Man, Myself. So I'm going to show it to you right here. And I am also giving away a couple of free copies tonight for those of you. So we're gonna do a trivia, and so whoever gets the answer correct, that's who will get a free copy of my book. And when I say free, that includes free shipping. So I'm going to turn it over to the best co-host on the East and West Coast.
So good evening, everyone. This conversation tonight is going to be very interesting because intimacy does govern relationships, whether we realize it or not. It determines whether you're going to be intimate, whether it's sexually, whether it's mentally, or however. So we are ready to get into it. So Nodella, let's go.
All right. So one of the things that I also so I kind of want to start off in this manner. So I want to talk about my book just a little bit, just to kind of lay a foundation on our discussion tonight. So the reason why I wrote my book in particular is because years ago when I was living in Connecticut, I would go to worship service and I would see people struggle to be intimate with a God they say they know. And one of the things that, for those of us who have come into the understanding, is that when you say you know someone, that means that you become intimate with them. And so I'm like, well, how are you struggling to be intimate with a God you say you know? It's like a husband and a wife struggling to be intimate with each other. That's what I use as a preface. And so, it bothered me so much so to where, I had wanted to do, I thought I was going to do some kind of a workshop or service, talking about to help us navigate back to what true intimacy is. But God never released me to talk about it publicly. And so I just held on to it. I'm like Mary, I pondered it in my heart. And then when I relocated, when he shifted me down here to Maryland, that's when he told me to write the books. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so I got up one day after I lost my job, and I don't want to go too much into that, but God was serious about me writing this book to where he caused me to lose my job. And when I say caused me to lose my job, they laid me off. They didn't fire me, they laid me off. And so when I got home, I said to God, I said, well, why did you let this happen? He said, I told you to write the 2 books. I said, I am when I retire. He said, no, I mean now. And so I got up the next morning and I said, well, God, what are we going to name this book? And immediately he says, The Intimate Place, My God, My Man, Myself. And rightfully so, the main part of the book is called The Intimate Place, because intimacy is a state of mind. It's not necessarily a physical place, although it can be a physical place. And even as Derek talked about, is that many people, they tend to focus on the sexual intimacy out of the others. And so in the book, I talk about, even again, as Derek mentioned, is how intimacy governs our relationship. But I talk about more specifically that depending on which intimacy you start that relationship with, whether it's a romantic relationship or friendship, or even having, just that family relationship, whatever intimacy that you have active the most, that's what's going to govern your relationship. So one of the examples that I use is that if you start your relationship, if this is a romantic relationship, and if you started off sexually, then that is what's going to govern your relationship. And so we can also understand why a lot of relationships are also dissolving, because it was built on the sexual aspect. And if a person feels that their needs aren't being met, or whatever the reason, it really does negatively impact that relationship. What do you have to say, Derek?
So I agree with that, but I think the first intimacy is being intimate with yourself, because I think that, and when we understand how being intimate with ourselves, it reflects how intimate we are with God. So when we start looking for relationships, we look for those things that we feel that we are lacking in, whether it's intimacy and sex, intimacy in a relationship, intimacy in various different things. But the first intimacy should start with yourself and then with God, because with that being the storehouse of where everything should begin, that is where you get to know yourself, understand yourself, respect yourself, and then you move on from there. But a lot of people do not go follow those steps. They follow other steps based on things that they see, and they mimic those things.
Okay, so this is where we have a difference of opinion, and definitely please don't take it as I'm saying that Derek is wrong. So my book starts off with having intimacy with God first. And the reason why I start my book off first with God is because he's the creator of intimacy. But it does connect in with, as we develop a relationship with him, it is helping us to also develop a relationship with ourselves. And I will agree to this point of that we do tend to neglect ourselves more so and attend to everybody else's needs. And we tend to, say, well, I'll get to me when I get to me. But usually by the time we get to ourselves, we're usually too tired. Even though you may want to go and do certain things, you're like, you know what, I'm tired. I'm getting in the bed and calling it a night. And so I talk about in my book how we need to start guarding ourselves in terms of making sure everybody else is straight, and then we have no gas in the tank for ourselves. And so again, the book is written God first, and it is predominantly because I am a Christian. And so again, my mindset was starting out our relationship with God, then your partner, and then yourself. And I put ourselves at the end only because, again, tying into, so then, you know what, maybe we don't disagree as much as I thought we do, Derek, because as I'm thinking and even walking through, is that although I put God and our partner first in the way that I wrote the book, I did it strategically only because, again, we cater more to our mate more than we do ourselves. Some of us, let me say some of us, because we'll leave it like that. Some of us. But my goal was that to show a pattern, hopefully, that when we get to ourselves again, we tend to run out of gas, and we're like, you know what, I don't feel like it. And we should not have to sacrifice ourselves for the sake of others, not all the
So,
time.
Nadella, so we actually agree. I guess it's the order that we
Yes.
look at it, because again, when we're doing these things, we're doing these things based off of the order that you did, but we neglect self first. And that's
Yes.
like you said, people tend to run out of gas because they stop looking out for self first and they start catering to everybody else's need, and then their needs go unmet. And then they start running out of gas because again, there's no room, or there's nothing to, or they're running off fumes. And so then when we start talking about it, going back into it, as we keep talking about and bringing back the mental health aspect of it, is when you run out of gas, you're in a world of hurt. And I'm going to use this for an example, Nadella. So today I was reading the news, and I was reading about this couple that were entrepreneurs that moved from St. Louis here to Georgia. And so when they got here to Georgia, they realized that they were struggling because they had no support. And so there was really no family support or anything. So they got it, I guess, from my understanding, the wife and husband kind of got into an argument, and the wife wound up shooting and killing the husband, then turning the gun on herself. And so when we talk about these things about intimacy, we really need to understand that if we have God in everything, and when we do need help, we need to cry out. We don't need to let things fester, because I mean, they were, and according to what I read, they were Facebook celebrities. Wow. And so the thing is that this is a good topic to talk about, because intimacy just is not about yourself, but it's about your whole being. And a lot of people don't understand that the whole being has to do with intimacy, and you can't be intimate with anybody else until you first become intimate with yourself.
And so I actually do talk about in the myself chapter, I actually do talk about that. And, you know, one of the things that I identify in the beginning of the book, as Derek has tapped into the mental aspect of it. So I list 5 types of intimacy. I start with spiritual. So the order in which I've written them, and it's not to say if somebody writes something similar and they write it in a different order, but again, this is, you know, books are written pretty much on people's personal beliefs and opinions. So I wrote the 5 types of intimacy as spiritual, mental, emotional, verbal, non-sexual, physical, and then sexual. So technically that's 6. But I identified it as 5 different types. And even as Derek talks about, is how when you don't have that foundation there, and again, this is in any relationship, when you don't have a particular foundation in that relationship, it tends to cause problems somewhere in the relationship. And so what we want to talk about tonight is that, you know, as I said in the video I did this morning, the live this morning, I was talking about how a lot of couples are now at home because we're still in the pandemic, and some marriages actually survive because some people don't feel the need to have to be around their partner 24/7. But now that you've been, I call it, put in timeout, how did they get through it when they were used to only spending, let's say, maybe 5 hours a week together, and now they almost around each other 24/7? You know,
Well,
so go ahead.
So let me say this, and I think that you tapped into something that's very important. It goes back to, what did you marry your spouse for? Whether it was for love, whether it was for materialistic reasons. So it goes back to arbitrarily looking at, why did you marry this person? Because if you love that person, every aspect of that person is still going to want to love to be around you. You're cherishing these precious moments. However, if you marry for the wrong reason, and all of a sudden you're happy that he's gone, he's making the money, and it's a money thing, then all of a sudden now he's home sitting in your face, or she's home sitting in your face. All of a sudden now you can't stand that person, because again, you married the person for the wrong reason. It may have seemed like love, but at the end of the day, love is built on a foundation. And if your foundation is weak, you will find out when you have to stay in the presence of that person pretty much almost 24 hours a day or longer than you're used to it, because again, you're going to want to run to get out of it.
Absolutely. And so one of the things that I shared with a former manager, I said that, again, my personal belief that if every relationship was truly based on what true intimacy is, and that's going to be one of the trivia questions, and no Googling, you cannot Google the answer for this, because I want to do an unofficial poll to see what is our audience's understanding of what intimacy is. So we'll get to that in 8 more minutes. So at 7:30, Derek, we want to do our first trivia. So, and I shared with her that a lot of relationships is missing that true intimacy. And so she was telling me about how she knew a couple who was married for like 30 years and then all of a sudden decided to divorce. And I'm like, nah, you didn't all of a sudden decide to divorce. And I shared with her, I said, they were missing intimacy. She said, no, intimacy is not going to fix every relationship. And I beg to differ. And again, this is my personal opinion. So audience, I need for y'all to chime in. This is not a trivia. I need for y'all to chime in and help me to understand, or, just to have this dialogue, that I feel that if their marriage was based off of true intimacy, and again, when we find out what the definition of intimacy really is, then I think it will change our perspective of, I believe that's what they was missing in their marriage. Because one of the things that I talk about in the book as well is that when you can no longer have sexual intimacy, how strong is your relationship? I'm not talking about a spouse withholding. I'm talking about if one of you become impotent. And believe it or not, ladies, women can become impotent. It's just a little different. What is holding that relationship together? And I understand you may say love, but remember, we're talking about tonight, our topic of conversation for our chat and chew is how intimacy governs our relationships. And again, although right now we're talking about partners, but this is also applicable with friendships. When I see, and Derek, please chime in after this, when I see the stuff that goes on between people who swear up and down they are the bestest of best friends, but yet you sleeping with each other's partners or spouses, or you doing all kinds of shady and shisty stuff, that ain't no friendship. Listen, my best friend and I, when we was in middle school and high school, we never even thought to touch each other's boyfriend. We never even thought to cross that line. If we had a disagreement, we never had a knockdown and drag out. It was always, she said what she said, and I'm like, okay, whether I liked it or not, I said what I said, but we kept it moving. We worked through it and we kept it moving. This friendship stuff today, I don't know what kind of friendship y'all call. That is not friendship in my book. Because you don't do stuff like that. You don't put your so-called friend's business out there because y'all had a falling out. What kind of mess is that? Go ahead, Derek. Let me eat me a grape.
Let me say this. Number one, it starts with respect. If your best friend or your other friends respect your relationship, they will not do a sex thing. So let's start there. Second of all, we have to look at the other partner in this situation. Again, we got some Fabios, Casanovas, money makers, and people don't see, they see the money, they see the materialistic things, they see the idea of what they can have versus jealousy. Let's just say it's a lot of jealousy out here. So that's why people do these type of things. Second of all, we as individuals need to learn to, number one, respect ourselves and cherish ourselves. Because again, we allow people to run over us and do things to us, and we don't take care or defend ourselves. So as long as they keep going and we don't correct them, they keep doing it, that's when they feel that, okay, well, you're going to allow them to do whatever they want to do with no respect. And so if they sleep with your best friend, oh, what happens? You know, you and your best friend might fall out. But you and that crazy person is still together. And again, they're doing it with someone else. Right. So if you don't correct bad habits, as we said before, in the beginning, bad habits going to keep continuing. So again, then you start wondering where the mental problems come in. It's because of what you allowed it to get to this point. It's intimacy, sexual, yes. I'll hear people just, I'm going to say even doing threesomes with other people. In your relationship, be careful what you ask for, be careful what you do, because again, once you let another person into your relationship, whether it's your house, your bed, or whatever, you have to understand that there are consequences for that. So if the person starts sleeping with that person behind your back, that's what you allowed because you started something that shouldn't have took place in the beginning.
Yes, yes, yes. And so I think because people don't really appreciate what intimacy is, what it really means, and again, its impact on our relationships. And again, we're not just talking about intimate partners, if you will, or romantic partners, but we're talking about with friends, and we're also talking about with family members. And so when the lines become beyond, I'll say it like this, when the lines become beyond blurred, that's when, like you said, Derek, a lot of things go on that at one point would have never gone on or didn't go on. And for whatever reason, you know, people have allowed themselves to be reduced to whatever it is that they're doing. And I think that, so when I wrote the book, my desire was to bring us back into a conscious state of intimacy, meaning that many times we have moments of intimacy, but we don't recognize it like that. And so one of the examples that I shared with a number of people, because they was asking me about my book, and I was talking about how it's so easily to experience all the other types of intimacies outside of the sexual intimacy, and we don't even recognize it. And so one of the examples that I use is that when the girls have a night out, they say, oh, me and my girls hung out. What you really truly should be saying is that we had an intimate time. And ain't nothing funny about that. There's nothing funny about that, to say, you know, because again, based on people's mindset, if their mindset is always about sexual, then that's where their mind is going to go. But for those who are in a place of understanding or having some measure of understanding of intimacy, they're not going to say, oh, y'all get down like that. No way. And so the same with guys. And I know guys are definitely much more reserved, is when the fellas go and hang out, they go to a game and they're like, yeah, me and the fellas hung out. No, y'all really had a time of intimacy that included emotional and mental intimacy, as well as verbal. And so you experienced at least 3 types of intimacy, and none of it was sexual. And I believe, and I'm not saying we got to start using this, because I know a lot of people don't like change, but I'm just saying, as this is our topic of conversation tonight, is that even just acknowledging within ourselves that this was an intimate moment. And again, it's not about a sexual anything. This is just simply, we're talking about intimacy. So it is now 7:30, Derek, and before you comment, so I want to ask you again, please do not Google. Please do not Google. I just want to do an unofficial poll and find out what is each of y'all's understanding of intimacy is. So if you could please either call in or leave a comment in the chat what you believe intimacy is. And whoever comes closest to the real definition will win a free copy of my book. So again, Derek was fine with it. So this is what my book looks like. It's not a thick book, but I'm gonna tell you, it has a lot of content in it, even though it's a thick book, a thin book. So if anybody wants to call in again, or if you can post your comments in the comment section to say, what do you believe intimacy is? And again, please don't use Google. I want to know what you think intimacy is. So I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes. Hopefully somebody will call in at least.
So while we're waiting on that part, let me go ahead and comment, because
Yep.
I think you brought up a great fact of intimacy among people that share the same like or familiarity. And a lot of people don't understand that. Intimacy does not have to be sexual. It is that people gathering to have a good time about the same mind, the same thought process, and they're just out having fun. And so I think that a lot of us misunderstand emotion. We misunderstand the definition of intimacy. And so this is a great platform to actually talk about it, because again, we as humans, we're not properly taught what these things are, because what happens is that we grow up thinking that intimacy is sex. It's not just sex. It can be a part of it, but again, before you get to that sexual level, you have to have some type of intimacy.
And so one of the things that I also talk about in the book is when I was growing up, and Derek, you and I are, I think, about a year apart. So we're definitely in the same generation. And I talked about how when I was growing up, we didn't identify it as intimacy, but a lot of the things we did was intimacy. But again, like you said, Derek, we weren't taught to identify what we were experiencing as intimacy. We just said, oh girl, we had a good time. And I remember my parents would go out partying every weekend, and they come back and talk about how much of a good time they had. When in actuality, they had a time of intimacy. And again, sex was not a part of the equation. All right, anybody else want to share what you believe intimacy is? So again, please don't Google it. I'm doing an unofficial poll, and I want to hear from you. What does intimacy mean to you? What is it to you?
Nadella, do you see Cynthia Stevens' comment about what intimacy is?
So she says, I think intimacy is having an amicable relationship with each other while getting to know each other. Anybody else? Come on. Come on, y'all are up here. I see at least 6 people up here. So come on and share. Again, there's no right or wrong answer, because this is the trivia. And I need at least one other person to give an answer so I can give away my book.
So Nadella, let me make a suggestion. Cynthia, if you don't mind inboxing Nadella, I would love to have you actually come on as one of our co-hosts, because I'm enjoying your comments. And so we want to hear from somebody else other than ourselves, if that's okay with you.
All right, so let me DM her from my cell phone.
So while we're waiting for that, we're waiting on somebody to definitely give us some good feedback, because what we're going to probably start doing from now on, even in these shows, are to actually start taking polls from people of there's no right or wrong when it comes to your opinion. And so we want people to totally understand that. So what we want to do is get you involved so other people can understand it's not just the way they think, but other people think other ways.
Right. And even with that, Derek, it also explains why we do also have miscommunications, because we assume that people know certain things, especially because they're an adult. One of the mistakes that we make is that we assume a person knows something because they're an adult. And that's not true.
And see, I'm glad that you said that because assumptions,
Yes,
assumptions, that's where relationships go wrong because you assume this is what the person got in a relationship for without having
yes,
that discussion. And just because you're spending time together does not mean that you want a sexual relationship. And a
absolutely.
lot of people take it to that point. And again, the person might be only up there as a best friend or someone to talk to, but you turn it into something else. And again, just the part of just having somebody to talk to is an intimacy.
So in chapter 2, which is the My Man chapter, and I just want to share with the men the reason why it says my man, because I'm a woman. And I just, for all the men who purchased a copy of my book, I just told them, listen, if you're into women, then you just flip it around. So somebody has suggested I should have, made it mate, but that's not what God gave me. I went with what God gave me because, again, the book was written from my perspective. So all the things that I say in chapter 2 regarding the woman towards the man, it works in reversal. And I do share in chapter 2 about how we have this compulsion to want to immediately rush into a romantic relationship with a person. And if we would just slow down and take our time, we would find out that we're actually better off friends than we
So
would be romantic partners.
you remember this, remember the courting days. That's what the old people call it, courting.
Yes.
And so we forgot about the courting in our generations. And the courting days, that's why marriages stayed together so long. That's how they were able to learn to forgive each other if there was some infidelity or anything else. Because again, during your courting days, you got to know each other. And at some point, there was some kind of breakdown in communication. However, that communication breakdown was not so bad that you couldn't come back to the table and correct it. Nowadays, it's not that. It's, oh, if you cheat on me, I'm out of here, this, that, and the other. And let me tell you, you may think you're out of there, but you're finding yourself going back into that same pattern because you never corrected the first wrong that was done to you, because now you're running, and everybody that do you wrong, you keep running from, except letting them know that they did you wrong and give them a chance to apologize for it.
Yes. But I have to be blunt with my next comment. Y'all know we are up close and personal show, right? Some of us knew what we was marrying, whether it was the woman, the man, or the man, the woman. Some of us knew what we was marrying, but we ignored the red, yellow, green, purple, blue, black, white flags. Because I just cannot live without this person. I just have to be with this person.
He or she looked good. That's what it was. It was all about the
Yes.
looks. Oh, I got me a yellow man. oh, I got me somebody with some money. And they never knew what was going on inside that person, what that person brought to the table. And that's a key thing, is that you have to pay attention what the person brings to the table.
Absolutely.
Because everybody don't have to bring money to the table, but you got to bring something to the table that I can identify with, that's saying it's not just a me thing, it's a we thing. Because intimacy involves a we thing. Even when we talk about it spiritually, we talk about a we thing between God and ourselves. How we want God to see us and how we want to do things to please God. So again, it's a we thing. And intimacy, again, knowing yourself during this phase of intimacy could be very, very challenging, because the problem is a lot of us don't know ourselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so, as we, continue to talk about, how intimacy governs our relationships, we definitely, again, I see people are online, and I know a lot of y'all like to just kind of sit back and listen to the conversation. But again, we would truly love to hear from you on this topic of, what has been your experience with intimacy. And we're going to use that terminology intentionally. We're using that terminology again because that's our focus of discussion. So we're using that terminology intentionally and purposely, consciously, because if you have not been looking at any of your interactions with others, and again, we're not limiting this to just being in a relationship with someone else, because you're in friendships is a form of relationship. Family is a form of relationship. So again, we're just kind of talking about how has intimacy governed, and remember, it says govern your relationships. We didn't say govern your marriage or your boyfriend or girlfriend, your relationship with your boyfriend or girlfriend, but we're talking about how does intimacy govern any of your relationships, because again, as I share in my book, I cross all divides, showing you that intimacy is not just limited to the sexual aspect, which is what many of us was brought up believing. But then even more importantly, unfortunately, society has really dictated to us what intimacy is. And I think that it has skewed a lot of our thoughts on what intimacy really is. And, a lot of men, I'm going to kind of go here a little bit. A lot of men have gotten into trouble because the woman smiled back at him, or because the woman gave him conversation, he automatically thought she was into him when she wasn't. And like you said, she was might have been just looking for someone to either have a friendship with, or she was just simply being kind to you.
I'm going to go here, Nadella. I remember growing up
you
and
can
listening.
Come off mute.
I'm going to go here because I remember growing
I'm
up
listening.
and listening to Mickey Howard's song, Love Under New Management. And when I think about the words to the song, because a lot of us don't pay attention to the words, we like the lyrics, but those lyrics are open for interpretation. So one thing she says in the beginning of the song is, experience is a good teacher. It takes someone like me to know all the silly games that people tend to play. Some call it love. So when you listen to that word exactly, what's your interpretation of it? So again, but throughout the song, she keeps singing, someone very special came into my life. She didn't say it was a man. She said somebody very special. Interpretation, it could have been a man. It could have been God showing her that, again, he came into her life and let her start seeing things that she didn't see before within herself. And a lot of people, when we listen to these songs, we just take the lyrics at face value. We don't study, we don't indulge into the lyrics to see what it really means.
Exactly. Cynthia, what do you have to say?
I'm totally in agreement with what he just said, But I also appreciate this discussion, because it needs to be, these things need to be brought out for understanding, because you put me on the spot, first of all, but
thank you.
But just even thinking about the question, and I was honest, I just gave you a definition off the top of my head, but I really never thought of it before you did. And this is a good exercise for us, even as adults, because we could have been misformed all our life, with certain definition of what intimacy is. So I really appreciate this discussion.
And we definitely have entered into a time where everything has been sexualized.
Yeah.
And again, still riding on that same train, if you will, people are still under the impression that intimacy is all about sex when it is not. So another thing that I want to share about my book is that we experience all of the other types of intimacies far more than we could ever experience sexual intimacy. And that is so ironic, to the point that with society sexualizing everything, but yet we know that sexual activity only goes but for so long. And we just gonna, just leave it like that, is that we know that sexual activity or sexual relationships only go but for so long. So what are you doing the rest of the time? Because if your relationship is based on sex, so then what are y'all doing the rest of the time? Waiting around until you gas up.
Yeah.
Listen, this is an adult show, so, and I am being tasteful, but I mean, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Is your relationship based on sexual intimacy?
But let me say this, Nadella, because again, but that goes to the type of music that we listen to also. Because again, in the baby booming eras, you had all of this R&B music out there that pretty much talked about sexual relationships. And again, when you were in the mood and you were in the sexual act, you had all this music that enticed you to perform all different kind of ways. So again, but again, people did not pay attention to what the lyrics of the song is. They just took the song for face. Oh, that sounds like a nice little, groove that that baby making music or we can have sex to. But at the end of the day, when you listen to the words to some of these songs, it is a very good opportunity. Because again, what I found out after me listening to a lot of R&B songs when I was growing up is that the words were talking about somebody's feelings. It was talking about how somebody felt, whether they was hurt, whether they was going through an emotional time of being happy. But again, we took all of that out of it and said, okay, you know what? Oh, this sounds like a good baby making song. We don't listen to the lyrics. We just, that's a groove that, that we can make love to or have sex to. Or even think about it. When we were young and we were going into clubs and everything, always at the end of the night, they always played the slow songs last, so you can have that close dance with someone. And the question was let's be honest, the question was, well, I'm gonna go pick somebody to see if she's gonna go home with me.
Exactly. And another thing is that much of the music also has subliminal messages in it. Like you said, a lot of that music in today is no different. And I think in some ways today's music is worse with the subliminal messages. But if you're just focused on, you just want to have something to pop your fingers to or just kind of move around a little bit, you're not even focusing on it, but even still at the same time, not realizing the subliminal messages that is actually coming through the song. And next thing you know it, if you pay close enough attention, you find yourself feeling some type of way. And it's not just even the sexual aspect of, making you like you and Derek, again, we're in the same age group. And it's not just even about the baby making music, but some of this music has caused people to become depressed. Some people have committed suicide because of the subliminal messages the music was putting forth. And because the person did not wasn't sensitive enough, if you will, to those subliminal messages, again, it put them in their feelings and it caused them to act out.
And that part of it was the brainwashing part of it, because again, instead of you trying to get away from it, you got more into it. And so when you start getting more into it now, it made you feel like, oh, this person making a song. And even with today's music, not just music, but even TV shows and everything and things that kids are watching on YouTube or TikTok and everything. Again, the subliminal message in it is what we need to pay attention to. Again, they get you hooked, but again, they get you, once you're hooked, what are you hooked on?
Yeah, I can testify about that because growing up, I'm sure you heard the accent. I'm from Jamaica and we love music. And growing up, music it still is my life, but there's a shift since I've given my life to God. But yes, I understand what you're saying, Mr. Derek, because I used to have to go to my bed with a certain type of music, and those type of lyrics weren't what I was supposed to be listening to. And after a while, as Nadella said, it, you know, subliminally, it goes into your subconscious, unsubconscious or subconscious mind. And before you know it, it becomes a part of your all emotion. And I start daydreaming as a young, you know, high school student. I start daydreaming about what I would have done. And, you know, before you know it, it become a part of you. Yes. So that is so true. And I've lived it because of even what I've absorbed in my spirit all these years. I actually want to live it. When I got a chance to be, you know, free, as I thought, I want to try a certain lifestyle, and, you know, like, and it all comes back to the music that I listen to, and I want to experience what it's saying. So I can relate to that.
But one of the hardest things, and I'm glad you said that, Cynthia, is to break out of it. That chain is hard to break. Because again, it takes a strong-minded person to break a chain of something that they've learned over years to get out of. And again, you have to have that balance. But once you get into the spiritual side of things, you'll start seeing things for what they really are. And it's hard if you're not at that place to understand what it actually means. And so I agree with you, because again, I'm with you. I used to have to go to the bed and listen to all kind of music, and then I started dreaming it in my dreams. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, your physical starts reacting to your inner, and so it gets to a point where you have to understand that, hey, something's got to give, because either it's going to overcome you, or you're going to break away from it. And so the hardest part is to break away from it. And because now you've gotten other people involved in it. And so when you get other people involved in it, they're going to think of you different when you start getting breaking away from it, because now, like, they thought you was a part of them.
That's right.
So growing up, my parents listened to a lot of different type of music. So I grew up listening to jazz, you know, obviously soul, R&B, reggae, a little bit of reggae.
All right, Adela.
That, you know, that was the type of person my mom was. Oh no. So my parents, you know, had a nice, back then, y'all youngins don't know what an album is. So, you know, it's a big round circle, they call it the wax, drop some wax. But
that was the 33 older, for some of y'all who forgot.
Yeah, the 8 tracks too. But, you know, even as Cynthia was saying, is that, you know, as I got older as well, and I began to start paying closer attention to the lyrics in the song. And how many know that, or let me say it this way, how many of us have listened to a song and we've been singing the wrong words? We thought they were saying one thing, and then you come to find out they were saying something, you know, totally different. And I know it may seem like we've gone off the topic, but we really haven't, only because this really do all tie into intimacy in terms of not just music has an impact on us. Even the types of conversations that we have also has an impact on us. It also is a guide to who we gravitate towards. Like, y'all know, football season. When you call me, what do you think our conversation gonna be about? Football. I don't want to hear nothing about no recipe. I don't want to hear nothing about no new nails, no new outfit. This is football season for me, and that's pretty much all I talk about outside of the word of God. And so anybody who knows me, they know what season it is for me. And so when they do call or they'll text me, they pretty much know what my response is going to be. And so not only music governs us, but even the types of conversations governs us based on what we like, which then really ultimately plays a role in our ability to have an effective life of intimacy. And so as I, talk about intimacy, many of us will have a moment of intimacy, meaning, you might be on the bus and somebody strike up a conversation with you or vice versa. That was a moment of intimacy. But in my book, I talk about having a life of intimacy, because when you have a moment of intimacy, that's a little more planned, because you decide who you're going to have a conversation with. If you don't want to talk, you ain't going to talk. But when it comes to having a life of intimacy most of the time is spontaneous. And again, we're not talking about the sexual. We're just talking about having a time of intimacy. And even as we're talking tonight, even now, we are having 4 different types of intimacy. We're having spiritual intimacy because we talked about the word of God. We mentioned God. We're having mental intimacy because of our thought process. We're having emotional intimacy because I know that we're excited about this conversation. We're enjoying this conversation, and we're having verbal intimacy because we're chatting and chewing. Or at least I'm doing the chewing. Chew.
Good.
So you did say the verbal. And so I'm glad that we are actually hitting on all of those intimacies that people don't pay attention to. Yeah. And so let me visit the emotional intimacy for a moment, because again, your feelings are very important.
Yeah.
And a lot of people take it for granted, but your feelings are very important, because again, it tells you what roller coaster you're going to go on. Whether you're going to go on a crazy roller coaster or you're going to go on a straight roller coaster and get off and move on. And a lot of us don't pay attention to that, because again, when we're emotionally attached to someone, it brings forth a lot of either good memories, bad memories, or terrible memories. And emotionally, when we get emotionally attached to something, it's hard to let it go.
It really is.
And so when something comes in and the emotional, because again, we didn't come in with the right type of emotional attachment or the emotional intimacy, we are stuck because that person does not feel the same way we do. So it's a one-way emotional intimacy that we thought the person reciprocated with, and they actually didn't. But we allowed them to come in to emotionally brainwash us or affect our mind without us paying attention to the signs that they were not feeling emotionally the same way you did. So let's use the younger generation, for instance. So you go and you meet this person and you think you're in love. And so all of a sudden he starts going out. One night he goes out, comes in 1 o'clock in the morning, you let him get away with it, or you let her get away with it. All of a sudden, then they understand that you let them get away with it. Then all of a sudden now they're doing 2 and 3 in the morning. And so again, you let them get away with it because you emotionally attach that person and think that you love them. Yeah. So then it goes back to all of a sudden now they're coming home 8 and 9 o'clock in the morning, but you're scared to let them go because you're emotionally attached to that person, thinking that they love you because you have trapped yourself emotionally in something that you thought was an intimate relationship with that person, but they don't share the same intimacy with you that you thought they did, because you allowed them to come in and you did not, how do I say this? You did not spend the time to get to that point of intimacy that you know the person. So you thought that, oh, well, the first 3 weeks, everything was going great. All of a sudden now you play the game, oh, well, he gonna move in or she gonna move in. And all of a sudden they start being themselves and you don't like it, but you sit there and you subject yourself to it because you think you're in love, or your emotions have gotten attached to this person and, oh, I can't let him go, or, oh, I ain't got no place to go. But again, it's because you allowed yourself to get into that situation.
So Cynthia, what do you think about intimacy with friendships?
I mean, intimacy with friendship. Again, tonight has been a challenging night with this topic because I've never really thought as deep as I am doing now. And it's, for me personally, it's a challenge to really think about it more. Friendship to me, intimacy with friendship, as I said, is getting to know each other socially, mentally, emotionally too, and without sex. I'm talking about that. Those are the emotionally, mentally. I'm not sure about the spiritual part. I'm not trying to be super spiritual, but
absolutely.
Yeah, but you know, all of these fall into place when it comes to any form of friendship, right? Because even if before you end up into a sexual intimate relationship, it starts from a friendship. You know, you're getting to know the person, see how and all of that. But
for some,
yeah, that's for me. But also I must admit, and this is where we grow, and that's where iron sharpens iron. I'm one of those person that can be easily can get easily emotionally attached to people. So I have to be aware of myself, be aware of my emotion, and that's where God comes in. That's why I believe in accountability partners, especially those, you know, someone or others that you can look up to spiritually. God is the ultimate, but you understand what I mean? You need people in your life that can snap you out of any emotional attachment that you may be encountering with so if you made to, as I was listening and thinking too, I'm wondering sometimes if we realize that we can be so emotionally attached to ourselves, and which is one of the most dangerous attachment, that we lock out everything else, and once it's not going our way, that's where the problem comes in. And then we're not seeking God's face. Sometimes we're not even attached to God emotionally, spiritually as we should, though we may sound like it, you know, but we may just have that mental knowledge or capacity about God, you know, we know the word, we know scripture, but how deep is your love, your passion, you know, that those areas in your life where no one else but God can see, you know, how intimate or emotionally attached are we to Christ? That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
So I just want to. No, that was perfect. And so before we move into the latter part of the talk show, I just want to now, I forgot to give the definition, because I did do the trivia asking what the audience thought intimacy meant. So the definition of intimacy in Latin, understand the word intimate comes from Latin, and it means to have a close relationship. It means to be friends. And so again, going back to, and that's why I asked the question about what do you think about friendship and intimacy? Because ultimately, when you meet someone, for the most part, not everybody, but for the most part, you are looking to have a relationship with that person. Again, you could have a desire to have just a friendship with them. So when you seek out to have a friendship with them, you are actually living in what intimate or intimacy really is. Because again, it means closeness, it means friendship. And so when you seek out that friendship, first and foremost, you're actually living in what intimacy or intimate really means. And one of the things that happens with so many, even friendships, is that, again, not really understanding what friendship means. And like I shared a little while ago, when we were growing up, I don't know if Kia's still up here, Lois, when we were growing up, we truly, and Cynthia, we can truly testify, we know what a friendship really is. When when we grew up, we really knew what a friendship was and is. And like I said, I don't know what their mindset is today, but these relationships that they're calling friendships, they are not real friendships, not when you do each other the way that you do each other. Real friends don't do that.
Right.
My best friend, her and I were really like sisters. People actually thought her and I were sisters. I'm not saying we got along all the time. And truthfully, we got along, I kid you not, 99% of the time. Not because I bullied her or she bullied me. Her and I really clicked. We got each other. I was the crazy one and she was the crazy one to follow the crazy one.
Compatible.
We really,
that's the crazy
really
part,
got each other
part now, because that's why there's a difference between the new generation friends and associates. And
friends
so
with benefits.
and again, that friend and that FWB for y'all Facebook fans.
Yeah.
The problem with FWBs is that benefit is not a friendly or intimate relationship.
It's really not.
And so the idea that people think that, oh, FWB, what are you getting out of it intimately?
Exactly.
Because all you're doing is pretty much getting your mind messed up. Because again, if you allow that person to come and go, and the only benefit that they're getting is sex, you're selling yourself short.
That's
you're
right.
robbing yourself big time.
Because
can I
again,
say something about that? Yeah, because even marriages, you can have a marriage for years, but there's no intimate except sex in that marriage too, and that's scary.
Yes.
And that's the thing, is what people bring to the table and what people lack in a relationship is because of things that happened in the past. And instead of us learning to heal ourselves from the past, we keep bringing what we know into a relationship, or thinking that we're getting into a relationship, and we're bringing bad, dirty laundry.
Wow.
And so when we bring dirty laundry into a new relationship, we have to eventually clean that laundry, or somebody's going to get tired of looking at your bad laundry. And this is why people go through divorces. This is why people go through domestic violence. It's because it's some unhealed thing that they brought into a relationship or into a marriage that somebody allowed to bring into it and never took the time to correct it, never took the time to know their self-intimacy, never took the time to know their self-worth or their self-value. Instead, they let somebody else dictate the value of what they feel that person should be. And so if nobody can tell me the value of Derek except Derek, because Derek walked that road of going through relationship to relationship to relationship, till one day I had to sit my own self down and say, hey, Derek, what are you doing?
Wow.
And when you sit yourself down and understand that while you're sitting down, it's going to be all these distractions that's going to come to kind of get you back in the game. But the best type of medicine, or the best type of healing to move on, is self-worth and spending time getting to know yourself, because everybody's not built for a relationship. Everybody's not built for a marriage.
Yeah.
But again, you won't know that until you sit down and know who you are and know yourself intimately. Because again, that's taking time with yourself, knowing yourself, learning yourself, and putting God into it, because a lot of us don't do that.
Yeah.
And that's why we wind up back in the same situations that we're in.
But can I ask you a question, Mr. Derek?
Yes.
Yeah. What would you say? I'm just a question, no specific person, to a couple, or probably it's not the couple's problem, but one of the member of the couple. Whereas all of what you said is on point, just sitting yourself down and, just talking to yourself about knowing your worth and all of that. What if in your, sinful state, or just lack of knowledge, immaturity, whatever way you want to put it, you find you weren't thinking of all of that, and you got into a marriage and realizing where you have messed up. How would you encourage a couple, that is in that predicament, I would say, no intimate relationship, but realizing that it was all probably just, just that moment, thinking that it was intimate, it was half-sided, just sexual, or probably looks, probably even because one person may have financial stamina. How would you encourage troubled relationship in that aspect?
Let me take that.
That have okay, they're into the point where now they are in Christ. Now they're in Christ and want it, to work, but it seems like nothing is there.
Well, first of all, my first answer is counseling. Because again, you need to learn how to fix it. And I'm going to say that it's not unfixable. It's fixable because, again, if they still want to be together. But again, each one of them need to go to counseling separately so that they can get their feelings out, so that they can learn to address the other person about their feelings. Because again, we are all good friends, and some things that you'll tell a counselor you won't tell your good friends because you're scared that that person's going to judge you. So my first thing is that you seek counseling, because again, you need to know what point you are, or when did you actually get into this and realize that you made a mistake. Second of all, you have to learn how to address the other person, because again, the other person may be thinking something totally different.
Right.
And trying to figure out why the marriage was bad at this point here. And even though we're in Christ, we're still in crisis. Because again, we have to fix this. And the only way I see, and I've learned to fix it, is through talking to a counselor that can actually listen to me thoroughly, give me advice, then bring me and my spouse together with that person so that that person can play mediator. So that it will make it seem like it's a fair balance ground, so that mediator will stop that person before they allow the other person to get their thoughts out, or even make their assumption before the other person is finished what they're saying, and then having someone translate the definition of what the person is saying.
Yeah, thanks for answering. Thanks. I see what you're saying. I agree with you. Just want to keep it real too. I've seen that, but there's cases where, people think, especially depending on their perspective in their faith, don't believe in counseling. So you on the outside, I think at that point, you probably just have to pray for them. That's it.
Well, yeah, I mean, pray for them and be that listening ear without being judgmental.
Without being judgmental. I agree with that part.
Yeah, because what happens is that sometimes we tend to lay in our feelings to their situation, and then what happens is they push away from us because they're thinking that we're trying to come in between their marriage, or we think that we're better than them. So again, you have to give them some reason to want to either seek help, because at the end of the day, if your marriage is in trouble, you need help.
Amen.
And sometimes it could be even the word, it could be prayer. But again, you got to seek it first, and you have to identify what the root of the problem is. Nadella?
Well, let me share with you my personal experience. And unfortunately, my perspective is totally opposite of Derek's. And I know some of y'all are going to be shocked.
It's okay.
Because I'm a minister, I'm a Christian, but we're talking about truth here. Because Cynthia's question was, what advice would you give to a person who realized they made the mistake of marrying a person? When you realize you made the mistake of marrying a person, you cannot fix it. You cannot fix it. Counseling is not going to fix it. I'm telling you from personal experience. I'm telling you from, and again, I know some of y'all are going to jaw drop, But I'm
Don't worry
telling
about
you,
what others think. Just
my
say.
first and only marriage, I lived exactly what you said, Cynthia.
Mm.
And I did all the praying. It did nothing. I did the counseling and it did nothing.
Wow.
Okay. And I want you to focus on the fact that you said because it was a mistake. We're not talking about that you was married and then you just kind of drifted apart or whatever, you know, life happened and now you're at this crossroads. You specifically asked what happens when you realize you made the mistake of marrying the person.
Hold on, Nadella, let me ask you a question.
Ultimately, go ahead.
Cynthia, are there children involved?
Children? No. We're not even going to add children.
No. I just want to know if there's children involved.
No, when I asked the question, I wasn't thinking about children, but even if children is involved, I'm assuming it's the same answer probably. But it's between these two people, right? Like, and even as Adela is focusing on the mistake, and that's I made that point, but it's not just from a mistake perspective, just overall based on all of the discussion leading up to this, whereas the person may not have realized that, hey, we really didn't have an intimate relationship. We just have a sexual, desire.
But that's two different, that's actually two different discussions and two different answers.
Yeah,
it's
but
actually not the same
mistake,
thing.
If I said mistake, that's also, I would like, I hear what you're saying, and that's also important because I've heard that too.
And so the fact, even again with the children, we had 3 children, and that was not my reason for staying in the marriage. I really was trying to work the marriage out. The children was not a key factor until things got so bad where it was affecting or impacting the children negatively. And that's when I said, okay, it's time for me to go. But again, your initial question was, what happens when you realize you made a mistake? Now, if you're also saying, and you, I guess, just kind of simultaneously was also thinking about, you reached this place in your marriage and things aren't going quite the way that you thought they would go, like you said, because the marriage was primarily based on sex. That is a totally different question. And my answer at that point would be different than what my answer is.
No problem.
If you married and you realize you made a mistake. Because like I said, I'm talking from my personal experience that I realized I made a mistake. I had no business marrying him.
I appreciate it.
Holy Spirit told me not to do it. I did it anyway. And then when I got into it and I was like, you know what?
Been there too. So I understand. When it's time to go, listen, whatever breaking point that you get to get out.
Wow.
And that's what I'm saying is that, so I tried to do the counseling. The counseling did not work. Listen, girlfriend, and I'm not boasting, but I'm just telling you, I could pray the house down. My prayers were the effectual, fervent prayer. But you got to remember, when you have one out the 2 who is not as invested as you are, then counseling is not going to work and prayer is not going to work. And let me tell you what God said to me. When I went to God and I said, God, I know there's nothing you can't do. I said, this is nothing compared to the stuff you've done. I said, this is nothing. I said, so I'm asking you to fix this marriage. And he plainly says to me, why am I going to fix a marriage with a person who said that they are never going to change?
Wow.
Well, let's say this.
He says
you get into a marriage,
and so he didn't fix it. And so the next thing I said, okay, God, sorry, hold on, Derek. So my next step was, okay, God, then can I leave now? And he allowed me to leave. First and foremost, I had no business marrying him. But he gave me the grace to stay married for as long as I did. See, and I'm going to go this way.
It's okay.
A lot of times we sit here and say God is waiting on us, when in actuality God is waiting on, we say we waiting on God, when God in actuality he's waiting on us. For the simple fact, he first of all told me not to marry him, right? I went and married him anyway, and God says, okay, that's what you want to do. Okay, go right on ahead, do your thing. It wasn't until I finally got to the breaking point of said I had enough, because I could have been out of that marriage year 1, year 3, any year prior to that 12th year, I could have left that marriage, but I decided to stay in it. So God wasn't going to fight me on it. God wasn't going to fight me, and he was not going to pull me by my hair and drag me out. If that's what I wanted, again, he gave me the grace to deal with all that I dealt with in that marriage. And it wasn't until I finally said I had enough. And I said, God, if you let me out, I said, just let me get this apartment. So the landlord was asking for all this money. I didn't have it. And I said, God, are you going to let me out? I said, so the sign would be, I get this apartment in spite of all this money this man is asking for. And guess what? I got the apartment.
Thank God.
But you know, the bad part about this, Nadella, when God shows us the signs, because like yourself, I had been in a previous marriage that, you know, God said, no, don't you do it. And because you thought you were in love, or you thought that the person had the same idea, you stayed. And God beat you, and God allowed you to get beat up.
Yes.
Because you did not listen to what he told you not to do. And you thought that you was right. So again, I was allowed a situation to get away from the person. And then when I got away from the person, the person tried to beat me down. I was in the military. They tried to take my military career away from me all of a sudden, because they felt that I did them wrong. When the whole time they were doing me wrong, because again, they didn't marry me for who I was. It was about the status and the idea of saying that you were married to a military spouse. So when God allowed me the opportunity to get out of it, and let me tell you how he does it. He separates you away from that person. So it gives you time to get to understand and start seeing things outside of the naked eye that you've been neglecting.
Yeah, seeing them for who they are.
Exactly. So there were signs and symptoms there, and I played it off as though it wasn't there. Again, it broke the relationship with me and my son, one of my sons. And I had to see it for what it was, because again, the whole time he was sitting there telling me, and I act like that it wasn't happening. Then when I got away to see and understand how he felt, I knew it was time for me to go. So when I moved somewhere else and that person stayed there, that told me that was my breaking point. And so I never allowed the opportunity to go back. However, during the time that I was divorcing the individual, they decided that they wanted to try to come back. And I had already moved on. And so what the devil was doing was trying to see if I was fully invested on getting out, or was I lukewarm and want to jump back into it just because the other individual felt that they made a mistake, and now all of everything that they thought they had is disappearing. So again, we as individuals have to learn that when it's time, or if the season is over, move on. Because everybody is not in your life to be in your life forever. So, and if we make that mistake, admit that we made that mistake, because that's the worst thing that we can do, is never admit that we made a mistake. Because if we don't, we'll fall back into that same situation or that same trap with someone else. And so what you start doing is looking for the signs to make sure that you don't fall back into another relationship with the same problem that you just recently left.
And so as we begin to wrap up, I want to read a couple of comments, and then I want to bring this back to our topic of discussion. Just again, although it seemed like we might have digressed or whatever, but believe it or not, all this plays a role in having a healthy life of intimacy. Yes. So Kia says a little bit ago, Derek, when you was talking, she said, absolutely right, Derek, you can't be in crisis plus be in Christ. You can't serve two masters. And then Lois says that it's not the same answer, and that was going back to whether there's children or no children. She was when I was talking about I was only addressing about the mistake, and then Derek was asking if there was children involved. But we do recognize people make the decision that they think is best for them at the time. And certainly, please, anybody who's listening or you listen to the replay, we are not judging anybody for your reason to stay. We're just saying that your children is not a healthy reason to stay in a bad or a poor relationship. And so ultimately tonight, we just wanted to talk about, what is people's thoughts on intimacy, when it comes to their relationships, because even with family members. So again, although we talked a lot about the romantic relationship part of it, and I was plugging in about the friendship, let's also not forget about the family aspect of it as well. Again, intimacy or intimate in Latin means to have a close relationship, to be friends, to have a closeness. And so unfortunately, some of us, we are not able to even have intimate relationship with blood family members because of either the way a person is, or because of a situation or situations that may have taken place, they haven't gotten over it. So there are even family members who are not able to have intimate moments with each other as blood family members because of some discord that has taken place within the family. Mm-hmm. And so again, when we look back at, for what, it's almost 2 years we've been in this doggone pandemic, we wanted to see how was everybody dealing with their relationships when it comes to intimacy, because again, everybody's level of understanding of what intimacy is, everybody is at different levels. But now, well, I'm single, so I live by myself, so I don't have to deal with that. And I'm not saying it negatively. I'm just saying, but it was still, excuse me, a good topic of conversation to see where was people at with their life of intimacy. And I use the word life of intimacy again, because it's something that you can do at any moment. Sometimes Derek will call and we'll get into these lengthy conversations. And so at that moment, we're having multiple types of intimacy in one conversation.
So Cynthia, we're gonna let you go ahead and comment.
What exactly do you want me to comment on? That
we're kind of at the end of the show, so we want you to give overall feedback, your thoughts.
Man, my thoughts, I'm gonna repeat myself. I just really appreciate this discussion. I don't know about anyone, it might seem simple, but it's not for me, because sometimes life would have you so busy that you don't stop and think about the things that are important. And for me, this is one of those moments to just pause and reflect on what intimacy really is in every aspect of my life. And I've started already to look into it, and just leave the rest to God. I appreciate you guys. I appreciate the discussion. And I would say to anyone that is listening, really take time out to examine yourself and know where you are. Be aware of your emotional state, mental state, spiritual state, and physical state when it comes to intimacy. So if there's even other relationship that we may either take for granted or playing around with, we need to be careful what we're entertaining or what we're not feeding.
Wow, that is actually a mouthful, because that is great, a great way to reflect. And believe it or not, this topic, me and Nadella talked about it probably about a year ago, but it took a different turn this time, because again, every time you talk about a certain topic, it's going to move. it's going to educate you more. It's going to come with more feedback, more feeling, more discussion. So I want to thank Nadella again for allowing us to even have this conversation again, because again, Nadella's book played a valuable role when I read it on some of the way of my thought process. And again, but it goes back to the individual, because it's a lot of times we entertain a lot of things and forget about ourselves. And we let the take who we are, and so we become who they want us to be and not who we really are.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I'm gonna let it go to you from there.
Yes.
Thanks. Well said.
And so again, you know, as we move forward, and just to remind those who are single, listen, just because you're single doesn't mean that you cannot experience intimacy either. And that's where the myself chapter comes in at, where I talk about creating moments of intimacy with yourself. You can have moments of intimacy or life of intimacy by yourself and with others, but ultimately it's about experiencing a time of joy, a time of happiness. And I gotta say this, and Kia, don't beat me up, because I can feel you now. One of the things that I don't like what's being said, and everybody has jumped all over it. And I think it's because it came from a celebrity. I think if it came from a regular person, people wouldn't have jumped all over it like that. So this particular celebrity talking about said that don't depend on me to make you happy. You need to make yourself happy. And that is not totally true, because happiness is a natural emotion. So again, when Derek calls me and we're engaging in a conversation, Derek is making me happy. I'm not saying my happiness is predicated on Derek, but what I'm saying is that when we have our conversations, when I'm talking to someone else about whatever, they bring a sense of happiness to me, but my happiness don't depend on them. So I think we need to understand, don't allow your happiness to depend on another person. However, that person can make you happy. Because listen, if I get married, if my husband don't make me happy, then listen, buddy, you got to go. You got to go. Because if he's not making me happy, then what is he making me? Mad? Miserable?
But remember this, Nadella, in a marriage, you're supposed to be evenly yoked. So again, if you're not evenly yoked, that means you're not bringing half to the table. Then again, you shouldn't indulge in it in the beginning.
Wow.
I agree. But I just, wanted to take this opportunity, to just say that, listen, to say that, don't be looking for somebody else to make you happy. Again, that is not a true statement. I will say it to this extent. Don't depend on them to make you happy, meaning that your happiness should not only come from them.
Right.
However, but they should bring happiness to your life and vice versa. Or otherwise, why do I need you? Because the opposite of happiness is miserable and mad. So then what conversation do we have? So I think we just really need to be careful of when we jump on these bad bandwagons. And again, I'm seeing people, because these celebrities are saying this stuff, and some of these celebrities, their life is tore up like a raggedy towel.
They give you TV screen answers.
Exactly. And I'm sitting here like, why are you listening to these people? But that could be another topic of discussion. But I just want to
Nadella, it reminds me of a song. I'm not picking because I love, because again, music, when you listen to music, it does give you that. Bob Marley said, when the music hits you, you feel no pain. So there's this gospel song that says, oh, as long as I've got King Jesus, don't need nobody else.
And
I have a problem with that line for years.
That's not a truthful statement.
Yeah.
But again, because she's famous, everybody's singing that song. And I don't sing, I do not sing that song.
I don't agree
for the simple
with
fact that's not, if you look at Bible, excuse me, Jesus did not walk alone.
We
He had
need
12 disciples.
we all need somebody.
Yeah.
And we all, exactly.
But you put it in its right perspective when you say we don't depend on them for our happiness or joy. But we all need people that makes us happy. If we're gonna be truthful. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I just want to say, because we're a few minutes over, I just want to say thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in tonight. I greatly appreciate you. Thank you so very much for the comments. As always, we love you and appreciate you spending an hour and a half with us. Sometimes we go a little over, but we really appreciate you spending that time with us. And I know for me personally, when y'all correspond with us during the live, you also help us to grow as well, because we have not lived your experience, just like you haven't lived our experience. And when we share like that, we really do help each other. And Cynthia, thank you so very much for, accepting Derek's invitation on the spot.
Thanks for trusting me to come.
Sorry, Cynthia, but thank you for your feedback.
I'm honored. Thank you.
Thank you so very much as well. And, Cynthia has, been watching us quite a bit. So I also want to take this opportunity before we close out. So I guess, it's technically they're no longer Facebook. They go by the name Meta. They've changed some of the features. So I'm looking at the comments, and they have Kia as being our #1 supporter. So Derek, we got to come up with something on what we can do for Kia to show our appreciation. For Lois, it shows a flag. I'm not quite sure what the flag means, but it does mean something. So, so we also want to do something for Lois. So I want us to get together this weekend and come up what it is that we want to do for them. And Cynthia, again, because you were the only one who answered the question, I will be sending you a signed free copy of my book, The Intimate Place, My God, My Man, Myself. For anybody who's interested, I did post it in the chat, and this is what the book looks like. If you Google my name, I'm the only one that's named Nodella Sacagawea Jordan, so you won't get anything fake. So when I become famous, you can prove to everybody, listen, I got a signed copy of her book.
You are famous already.
But again, thank you so much. And Derek, you rock, and I love you. And Netta, I know you're over there in the cut somewhere, so I love you too. And thank you so very much, for even your support, even though, you tend to kind of stay in the back. So next week, I'm not sure what we're going to talk about next week. We're always welcome to any suggestions that you have. Go ahead.
Actually, are we going to be on next week? Because remember, it's
that's right. I forgot. Yeah, thank you.
Turkey.
I forgot. Thank you, Derek, for reminding me. So next week, we won't be live because it's Thanksgiving. So we hope each and every one of you have for those of you who celebrate Thanksgiving as a holiday, we hope that you have an enjoyable time with your family and or friends. And for those of you who just simply like to gather, we still hope that you have a safe and enjoyable time with your family and your friends. So we will actually see you in 2 weeks then.
Yes.
Okay, and that will then be December. That will be December 2nd. So our next live will
be Derek's birthday.
Okay.
Awesome.
All right. Well, since we, live so far apart, unfortunately, I can't come over there and throw confetti at you. So we'll have to do virtual confetti.
That may be a good plan because he has been very faithful for the program. So you probably have to keep a virtual party for him.
That's not a bad idea.
Yeah, we're actually, that might not be a bad idea. So we'll have a virtual party for Derek on December 2nd.
Hey.
And invite all our listeners and friends to actually join in the party.
Definitely. So
That's
we
right.
do have some stuff coming up in December. And so we're going to close out the end of the year with a big bang, and we got some things in the works. So, we do hope that you continue to tune in, and, we just encourage you to continue to tune in, because we got some great stuff to talk about. And next year we're looking for even greater. So until December 2nd, everyone stay safe, stay blessed, and be good. Good
Good
night.
God bless. Bye.